Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown.
Are you?
Today I am.
You look like David Lynch with your hair.
Yeah, it's kind of all crazy all over the place. I thought we were going to do it this afternoon so I would have time to shower and all that kind of stuff. But Matthew said, "Can you do it now?" And I'm like, all right, let's go.
I have board games to play this afternoon.
Oh, who you playing with? Justin and friends?
Some neighbors downstairs.
Oh, nice.
Mansions of Madness.
Oh, I want to play.
Yeah, it's fun. This story we're doing today I'd never heard of, and now I'm angry.
Right. And people who haven't heard of it will be, and people who have heard this story before will understand why people are angry, because they're probably already angry.
So you got me riled up this morning reading this.
Good.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Listener discretion is strongly advised. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We're two ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
At 5:18 a.m., May 9th, 1992, in Plymouth, Pictou County, Nova Scotia, in the Westray Mine, a methane gas explosion followed by a coal dust blast ripped through the underground tunnels, claiming the lives of 26 miners working the night shift. The tragedy unfolded against a backdrop of known safety violations and ignored warnings. In the aftermath, a gripping rescue attempt captivated the nation as teams of drägermen braved hazardous conditions in a desperate search for survivors. The bodies of 15 miners were recovered during the initial rescue and recovery efforts. However, the remains of 11 miners were never recovered and remain entombed deep within the mine to this day. Despite criminal charges being filed against the mine owners and its management, no convictions were secured due to the complexity of establishing legal responsibility. More than 10 years later, the federal government introduced amendments to the criminal code in response to this tragedy. This is Dark Poutine episode 352, The Westray Mine Disaster. Coal, often called the rock that burns, is a significant energy source. It primarily consists of carbon 50 to 98%, hydrogen 3 to 13%, and oxygen with smaller amounts of nitrogen, sulfur, and other elements. It also contains water and inorganic particles that remain as ash after combustion. Coal plays a significant role in the global energy supply, though this is not widely recognized. In the 1990s and into the new millennium, coal was, and despite its adverse effects on the environment, continues to be the primary energy source for approximately 55% of all energy generation in the United States and Canada. Today, coal accounts for approximately 36% of electricity generation in Nova Scotia, according to recent estimates, a significant reduction from the 60% 2 decades ago. This shift reflects the province's ongoing transition toward renewable energy sources, comprising over 40% of its energy mix. Humans have been using coal and its byproducts for tens of thousands of years, with evidence pointing to its use for both practical and artistic purposes. The earliest known use of coal dates back approximately 25,000 years, when prehistoric European inhabitants utilized black coal near the surface for basic needs such as warmth and cooking. According to the Royal Alberta Museum, as early as 10,000 years ago, Indigenous peoples in Alberta began crafting effigies from coal found in seams within the foothill and mountain regions. Many of these carvings depicted bison, often female, with their tongues extended, symbolizing either movement or labor. Despite damage caused by agricultural plowing, the surviving effigies remain remarkable for their detailed and anatomically accurate representations of bison. By around 4000 BC in China, Neolithic people began carving ornaments from lignite, a soft form of coal, marking its earliest decorative application. By 1000 BC, coal was being used in China to smelt metal, where Romans later adopted it for heating baths and working iron during their expansion into Britain. The history of coal mining in Canada is deeply intertwined with the development of Nova Scotia, where the industry has left an indelible mark on the province's economy, culture, and communities. Nova Scotia's coal fields, particularly those in Cape Breton, were among the earliest and most significant sources of coal in Canada, shaping the region's industrial and social landscape for centuries. According to the Parks Canada website, the text of a plaque placed at 6 Mines Road, Port Morion, Nova Scotia, indicates the beginning of coal mining in our country. The plaque's text reads, quote, Canada's coal mining industry had its beginnings during the French period near here on the north side of Morion Bay. The existence of surface coal on Cape Breton was first recorded by Nicholas Denys in 1672. This coal, which was easily removed by crowbar, was loaded in small amounts by both French and English ships in the late 17th and early 18th centuries. The first attempt at regular mining in America was made here in 1720 to supply Louisbourg. About this time also, coal was exported clandestinely from Morion Bay to Boston in exchange for bricks, lumber, and provision. End quote. This marked one of the earliest instances of organized mining in North America. Initially, coal was extracted from surface seams along cliffs, but underground mining methods were developed as demand grew. By the late 18th century, mining expanded under British control, with operations managed by private individuals and colonial authorities. In 1826, the Crown granted exclusive rights to Nova Scotia's coal resources to the General Mining Association, GMA, a syndicate of British investors. The GMA played a pivotal role in industrializing coal production by sinking shafts, building railroads, and establishing company towns like Sydney Mines and Stellarton.
I'm going to do fun facts about coal.
Fun facts about coal, the burning rock. Yeah.
So I was talking to Justin about this morning, and he's like, do you know how coal is made? And I'm like, no. I guess during the Carboniferous period, which was 360 million years ago.
Carboniferous
period. So Earth was a swampy paradise with massive plants, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the plants died, this is the interesting bit that I never knew. There was no fungi the fungi hadn't developed that was capable of breaking down plants.
Oh, so it hadn't evolved yet.
It hadn't evolved. So when the plants fell over or died, fungi didn't rot them. So it just, it created layers and layers and layers and layers. And eventually the pressurized it over millions of years to coal. And then about 290 million years ago, fungi evolved the enzymes to digest plants. That's disrupted the cycle, so there's no more coal formation because of fungi.
Which is why it's a limited resource.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
Now you know.
Now we're coal nerds.
And it's also why coal is so deep in the ground and why we have bad things happening like this, because we have to go so deep.
By the mid-19th century, Nova Scotia had become a major player in Canada's coal industry. The GMA's monopoly ended in 1858, leading to a surge in independent mining operations. Between 1858 and 1893, over 30 mines were opened across the province, producing hundreds of thousands of tons of coal annually. Towns like Glace Bay emerged as industrial hubs, with as many as 12 mines operating simultaneously. By 1903, the Dominion Coal Company had consolidated much of Cape Breton's coal production, accounting for nearly half of Canada's total output by 1912. This period saw Nova Scotia's coal fueling steel mills in Sydney and industries across Quebec and Ontario. Over its history, more than 300 underground mines operated across 7 counties in Nova Scotia, producing approximately 400 million tons of coal. However, by the mid-20th century, competition from oil and natural gas led to declining coal demand. Today, large-scale mining operations have ceased in Nova Scotia, but its legacy endures through preserved mine sites and museums that honor the contributions of miners to Canada's industrial growth.
I actually find museums like this really sad. That you had an industry that was so important to the fabric of these communities is now a bloody museum.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, they're just reminders for me of like sort of the death of the middle class and the death of small communities.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right?
I went to the coal mine museum in Glace Bay many, many years ago when I was a kid, and we got to go down inside a coal mine. Have you ever been in one?
No, I've been in a salt mine, and I've been in the old nickel mine over at Britannia Mines.
But yeah, so a coal mine is an interesting place. And even when we were down there, as tourists, we were told, do not go down this shaft. It was all roped off, all that kind of thing, because there's methane down there and you will die. There's not enough oxygen.
Yeah, I mean, the mines are, the museums are interesting, but I just find them sad.
I find them sad for the same reason. I mean, this industry is dying. I mean, the environment's a little happier for this particular industry going away, but you're right about the death of the middle class. Underground coal mining has always been dangerous. Like all underground miners, coal workers risked falling rocks, collapsing tunnels, and treacherous shafts. However, the chemistry of coal added unique and lethal threats. Among these was methane gas, or fire damp, a highly flammable hazard lurking in coal seams. A single misplaced explosive, a faulty gas lamp, or a stray electrical spark could ignite it, unleashing devastation. Coal dust added another layer of risk. While more challenging to ignite than methane, it could explode with deadly force if a gas blast stirred it into a combustible cloud. Even those who survived an initial explosion often faced the horrors of afterdamp, a toxic cocktail of carbon monoxide and other gases that spread insidiously through the mine, snuffing out lives. The working conditions in Nova Scotia's mines were notoriously harsh and dangerous. Miners faced long hours underground in poorly ventilated tunnels, often extending beneath the ocean floor. Explosions caused by methane gas and coal dust were common hazards. Despite these challenges, miners developed tight-knit communities characterized by resilience and solidarity. We've covered one deadly mining tragedy before on Dark Poutine. Episode 137 focuses on the tragic events of June 19, 1914, when an explosion at the Hillcrest mine in Alberta's Crow's Nest Pass claimed 189 lives. It remains the deadliest coal mining disaster in Canadian history and explores the devastating aftermath for the miners' families and community. While the Hillcrest mining disaster is the worst, I could spend the next year discussing coal mining disasters in Canada. There have been so many. It is difficult to determine the exact number of miners who have died in Canadian mining accidents since records began, as comprehensive data is incomplete. Not every death was recorded. However, some estimates and regional figures provide insight into the scale of the loss. In Nova Scotia alone, there have been 2,497 documented coal mining fatalities, though this list is acknowledged to be incomplete due to missing or lost records. Nova Scotia has a long and tragic history of coal mining disasters. One of the earliest significant disasters occurred on May 13, 1873, at the Drägermen Mine in Westville. During a routine operation, a miner named Robert McLeod set off a gunpowder charge that ignited an unusual amount of gas. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. Flames shot up over 1,400 feet, and debris was hurled into the surrounding area. The blast not only killed many miners, but also caused panic in nearby communities. Reports described how, quote, the earth for miles around was shaken with the violence of the explosion, end quote, leaving residents frightened and mourning as nearly every family in Westville lost someone due to this disaster. In total, 60 miners lost their lives, and it took 2 years to recover all the bodies from the mine. Another notable tragedy occurred at the No. 12 colliery in New Waterford on July 27, 1917. At approximately 7:20 a.m., an explosion rocked the mine, trapping about 270 men underground. The explosion was concentrated between levels 5 and 7, located 2,000 feet down. Despite rescue efforts, 90 men were initially reported missing, with only 25 being rescued several hours later. This disaster profoundly impacted the community as many families faced loss and grief. The Spring Hill mining disasters are among the most infamous in Nova Scotia's history. The first major disaster occurred on February 21, 1891, when an explosion caused by accumulated coal dust killed 125 miners. This event was so significant that contributions to aid the victims' families came from across Canada and even from Queen Victoria herself. The aftermath saw rescue workers facing perilous conditions as they navigated through unstable shafts filled with deadly gases. In addition to these large-scale disasters, smaller but still tragic incidents occurred infrequently due to negligence and poor safety practices. For instance, between 1838 and 1950, it is estimated that 246 miners were killed in similar methane and coal dust explosions in Pictou County alone. Outdated safety measures exacerbated the dangers of coal mining. Open flame lamps were still used in some mines until well into the 20th century, increasing the risk of ignition from flammable gases. Additionally, another 330 mining-related deaths occurred in Canada's other provinces between 1866 and 1972.
Can you imagine any other industry with this many deaths? Imagine if a retail chain like Walmart had like this many deaths, right?
Well, there was one in Nova Scotia.
There was one,
recently.
but that might, and everyone freaked out,
right?
Appropriately, but for some reason, it just was accepted that it's mining. Yeah, there's going to be deaths. It's such the wrong way of thinking.
Whenever I think of coal mining, for some reason, I think of the movie Zoolander. Do you remember that?
I think of Coal Miner's Daughter.
No, I just think of Zoolander going,
I've got the black lung, Pop.
and I mean, that was actually a thing, not to make fun of.
Of course it was, yeah.
Anyway. Pictou County, Nova Scotia had historically depended on coal mining for over 150 years, but saw its last working mine close in the 1970s. By the 1980s, the region was struggling economically. The closure of mines and reliance on other industries like pulp and tire manufacturing had not fully compensated for the loss of mining jobs. Living in the region was challenging, with high unemployment and a need for a new industry. High energy prices and unemployment renewed interest in the area's rich Ford coal seam, which was seen as a potential economic lifeline. Curragh Resources, a Toronto-based company, announced plans for the Westray Mine in 1988. The project was supported by significant financial backing, including a $12 million loan from the Nova Scotia government, led by Premier Donald Cameron, and a $100 million loan guaranteed by the federal government. Nova Scotia Power Corporation also agreed to purchase coal from the mine under a long-term contract. The mine officially opened on September 11, 1991, promising to create 300 jobs lasting at least 15 years to extract an estimated 54 million metric tons of thermal coal from the mine near Stellarton. Before European colonization, the Stellarton, Nova Scotia area was part of the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people who have lived in the region for thousands of years. The Mi'kmaq are part of the Wabanaki Confederacy, a group of Algonquin-speaking nations in the northeastern part of North America. The Mi'kmaq had a deep connection with the land and waters, relying on the rich natural resources for their subsistence, including hunting, fishing, and gathering. They used the nearby East River and its tributaries for transportation, fishing, and trade. The Mi'kmaq followed a semi-nomadic lifestyle, moving seasonally to harvest resources while maintaining spiritual and cultural practices tied to their surroundings. Their social structures and oral traditions emphasized respect for the environment, kinship, and harmony with nature. This way of life persisted until the arrival of European settlers who brought significant disruptions to their culture, land use, and sovereignty. What became Stellarton is now a small town in Pictou County with a rich history rooted in coal mining and industrial development. The area was first settled in 1774 by families arriving on the ship Hector, and coal mining quickly became the backbone of its economy. Coal was discovered in the late 18th century, and by the early 19th century, the region's vast coal reserves were being exploited. The General Mining Association, GMA, took over operations in 1827, introducing advanced technology such as Nova Scotia's first steam engine for mining and Canada's first iron railway. The town was initially called Coal Mine Station, and later Albion Mines, before being renamed Stellarton in 1870 after stellarite, a type of coal known for its star-like sparks when burned. Stellarton became a hub of industrial activity during the 19th and early 20th centuries. The GMA's innovations, including the introduction of the Samson locomotive in 1839, helped establish the town as an essential center for coal transportation. By 1914, the Acadia Coal Company employed over 1,300 miners, fueling Pictou County's industrial boom. However, mining began to decline after World War II due to economic and safety concerns, with operations ceasing entirely by 1957. Despite this downturn, Stellarton retained its historical significance through institutions like the Nova Scotia Museum of Industry, which preserves its artifacts from its mining heritage. The town also became home to Sobeys, one of Canada's largest grocery chains, which began as a local butcher shop in 1907. While primarily residential today, Stellarton has maintained some industrial presence with factories producing workwear and beverages. Its history is marked by resilience and innovation, making it a cornerstone of Pictou County's cultural and economic legacy. The announcement of the Westray Mine brought hope to many in Pictou County. Residents were optimistic about the economic opportunities it would create. For example, at the mine's opening ceremony, attended by nearly 500 guests, there was widespread enthusiasm about its potential to provide stable employment in an area that desperately needed it. Elmer MacKay, then a federal minister and local MP, symbolized this optimism by cutting the ribbon on what was described as a transformative project for the community. The Westray Mine employed 143 people, including miners and administrative staff. Of these, 117 were miners who worked underground, while the remaining employees held roles in management, engineering, safety oversight, and surface operations. This workforce was drawn from across Nova Scotia, with many employees having experience in other mines like Gaze River before joining Westray. However, many were locals without a lot of experience. Residents expressed their hopes for economic stability and prosperity. One local worker remarked, quote, "We've been waiting for something like this for years. Finally, we'll have steady work again," end quote. There were safety concerns right out of the gate. Miners worked in shifts, often 12 hours long, despite this being a violation of the Coal Mines Regulation Act, which limited underground shifts to 8 hours. Some workers appreciated the longer shifts for the extended days off that followed, but others found them physically demanding and unsafe. There were other concerns, too. More after the break. And we are back. Matthew, thoughts so far?
I grew up in a small town where a few industries provided majority of employment. And, I just find it just incredibly sad, like the hopes of this industry coming to revitalize the town and then having a disaster so quickly, right? It's just, it's just incredibly sad.
Well, it would be like, for example, the Michelin tire plant in Bridgewater blowing up. I mean, that is the only industry really in Bridgewater right now. And,
it'd be like yoga studios blowing up in Vancouver.
Oh, God. But growing up, you think, if you're from a small town, you think, how am I going to make it? Mm-hmm. How am I going to make it? Like, I'm not going to go to school and be a professional. I'm just not. That's not my bag. So how am I going to make it? I'm going to end up working at one of these industries where I'm treated like a cog, essentially, and that's the plight of a small town person.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know what I was going to do when I grew up. I still don't.
You're doing it.
I guess so. But with so few industries in Canada, what are people from small towns doing now to survive? As well as being overworked, the Westray Mine's workers raised numerous safety concerns, but management largely ignored them. One of the most significant issues was the dangerously high levels of methane gas present in the mine. The ventilation system was poorly designed and inadequate for clearing or monitoring the gas, which, as we've mentioned, is highly explosive. Methane monitors were often tampered with or turned off to prioritize production, exposing workers to significant danger. Compounding this issue was the placement of return air ventilation in the same tunnels as conveyor belts, which increased the risk of ignition from heat or sparks generated by moving equipment. Another critical hazard was the accumulation of coal dust throughout the mine. Thick layers of this highly flammable material lined the floors and walls, creating a ticking time bomb. Despite repeated warnings from inspectors, management failed to implement proper stone dusting measures to neutralize the explosive potential of the dust. Workers even reported walking through ankle-deep coal dust in some areas, underscoring the lack of attention to basic safety protocols. The structural integrity of the mine was also a significant concern. Frequent roof collapses occurred due to inappropriate mining methods such as room and pillar techniques that were unsuitable for the unstable geological conditions of the Ford seam. Inspectors repeatedly flagged these issues, but management took no meaningful action to address them. Roof support plans were inadequate, leaving miners vulnerable to injury or worse. Ignition sources within the mine added another layer of danger. Unsafe practices such as using non-flame-proof vehicles and exposed electrical wiring created constant risks in an environment already saturated with methane and coal dust. Workers also used acetylene torches in high methane areas, increasing the likelihood of a disaster. Sparks from mining equipment cutting into pyrite, a known hazard, were another ignition risk that went unaddressed. Beyond these physical hazards, there were significant concerns about worker preparedness and emergency planning. Miners received insufficient training on safety protocols and emergency procedures, leaving them ill-equipped to handle dangerous situations. The mine also lacked a comprehensive emergency response plan, despite regulators raising concerns about this before operations began. Underlying all these issues was a culture of negligence fostered by Westray Mine's management. Warnings from inspectors, experts, and workers were routinely ignored in favor of prioritizing productivity over safety. Illegal practices became commonplace, such as bypassing safety protocols by operating machineries in areas with methane levels above permissible limits or refueling vehicles underground.
I'm probably going to say this a few times through this episode, but it is so unbelievable that there were so many warnings that were ignored by management.
Yeah.
It's criminal.
It is criminal, but apparently it's not. We'll find out.
And this is what got my ire.
On May 9th, 1992, at approximately 5:18 a.m., tragedy happened in a flash. A massive explosion ripped through the underground coal mine. Westray miner Dave Matthews and his wife returned from a trip to Boston on the evening of Friday, May 8, 1992. Matthews was staying in a house at the foot of the driveway leading to the mine. His wife decided to stay with him in the company house overnight before heading to their home in Cape Breton the next day. Matthews was scheduled to work a night shift at the mine on Saturday. They heard the explosion but didn't initially realize what it was. Matthews looked out the bedroom window and described hearing a lingering rumbling noise. Quote, "The remnants of the noise were still coming," end quote. Heading downstairs, he saw most of the windows in the house had been blown out. When he opened the door, he observed dust and stones, quote, "still coming out of the entry of the mine." He hurried back upstairs, got dressed, and told his wife he was heading to the mine site to investigate. Despite her reservations, Matthews remarked, quote, "That don't look good over there," and as he left, he ominously added, "I don't think anybody is going to walk out of that pit," end quote. On his way to the portal, Matthews was picked up by Westray General Manager Gerald Phillips and his daughter Samantha driving to the mine. Phillips shared that he had been, quote, "blown out of bed by the explosion." At the security gate to the mine property, they encountered the security guard who appeared confused and unsure of what had happened. The guard mentioned calling foreman Amy Smith. Phillips then instructed Samantha and Matthews to, quote, "get on the phone and begin assembling rescue personnel." Matthews noted that they only had an incomplete employee list to work with as, quote, "half of them had no phone numbers." They contacted the local operator who assisted, including access to new listings. Matthews recalled that Foreman Smith arrived next, followed by either Underground Manager Roger Perry or Assistant Underground Superintendent Glyn Jones. Matthews and Samantha Phillips remained on the phones coordinating efforts from 5:30 to 8 a.m.
So sloppy again. Like, how badly was this thing managed? They didn't even have a complete list of who was there.
Right.
You know, and
or a way to contact relatives.
Or a way to contact anybody. It's just, it beggars belief at how absolutely sloppy this was.
Yeah.
Just sloppy.
Yeah. Witnesses near the site described chaos, confusion, and disbelief in the aftermath. Firefighter and first responder Mark Carmichael recalled to Maclean's magazine, quote, "When I got the call, I didn't even realize the full scale of what we'd be facing. But when I arrived and saw the smoking mine's entrance, the gravity hit me. This wasn't an ordinary rescue operation," end quote. Smoke and dust billowed out of the entrance shaft as rescue teams scrambled to access the underground workings, though they faced significant risks due to the instability of the mine. First responders and rescuers, known as drägermen, faced unimaginable conditions as they descended into the devastated mine to search for survivors and recover bodies. Ron Cunningham, a drägerman, recalled the urgency and peril of that morning. Quote, "By 6:40 a.m., a Westray dragger team was heading down the mine on foot. They were soon joined by brother rescuers from Cape Breton, Pugwash, and Bathurst mines. True to their valiant tradition, drägermen pushed down through perilous devastation." End quote. The teams worked tirelessly under extreme conditions, navigating collapsed tunnels and toxic gases in the hope of finding survivors. Graham Clough, who helped coordinate the rescue operation, described the logistical challenges faced by rescuers. Quote, "At any one time, we had one rescue team in action, one on standby at the underground fresh air base, one on standby at the portal, one coming off shift, and one coming on. Each team moved up one stage at approximately 1 to 2 hour intervals." End quote. The coordination required to manage multiple teams while ensuring their safety was immense. Police agencies, fire crews, and paramedics descended on the site, as did the news crews. Families of the missing miners were left to worry about the fates of their loved ones. The physical and emotional toll on the rescuers was profound. Clough noted how oppressive the conditions were. Quote, "Carrying about 23 kilograms of equipment on one's back and belt is oppressive in the extreme," end quote. Despite these hardships, teams pressed forward. On May 10th, Mother's Day, they uncovered 11 bodies. Over subsequent days, they recovered 4 more before worsening conditions forced them to abandon efforts to retrieve the 11 remaining miners. The scene underground was haunting. One rescuer recounted finding 6 victims close together with their self-rescuers still attached to their belts, a grim indication that they had no time to react before succumbing to the explosion's effects. Another body was found crushed within machinery compacted by the blast's force, making recovery impossible.
We can't even imagine the force of that explosion, Mike.
No.
It would have been pressurized under there as well, right?
Sure, because it's contained in a small space, so when it blows just wherever there's space. Yeah.
The one thing I'm glad people didn't suffer for very long.
There were a couple. I watched the documentary just called Westray on NFB, and it's available for anybody to watch for free, I think, in Canada. It's also on YouTube, so it might be available to everybody outside of Canada. But it mentioned in the documentary 2 men were found with their hands covering their face like they knew it was coming.
Yeah.
That's horrible. Like you're about to die, so you just cover your face. Like instinctually.
Yeah.
I guess. Later in the Globe and Mail, Nova Scotia Premier Donald Cameron described the scene during his visit to the site. Quote, "It was a somber and heart-wrenching experience. You could feel the weight of the tragedy in the air." End quote. Despite heroic efforts by rescuers who worked tirelessly to locate survivors, the grim reality soon became apparent. All 26 miners trapped underground had perished in the explosion. The dead were John Thomas Bates, 56, Larry Arthur Bell, 25, Benny Joseph Benoit, 42, Wayne Michael Conway, 38, Ferris Todd Dewan, 35, Adonis J. Dollamont, 36, Remy Joseph Drolet, 38, Roy Edward Feltmate, 33, Charles Robert Fraser, 29, Miles Daniel Gillis, 32, John Philip Halloran, 33, Randolph Brian House, 27, Trevor Martin John, 36, Lawrence Elwin James, 34, Eugene W. Johnson, 33, Stephen Paul Lilly, 40, Michael Frederick McKay, 38, Angus Joseph McNeil, 39, David Martin, 35, Harry A. McCallum, 41, Eric Earl McIsaac, 38, George S. James Monroe, 38, Danny James Poplar, 39, Romeo Andrew Short, 35, Peter Francis Vickers, 38, and the youngest to die was Robbie Doyle, only 22. Robbie's brother Alan had been working on the surface when the blast happened. He saw the smoke and flames pouring out of the mine's entrance. He later recalled to the Tyee in Vancouver, quote, "That mine was a place called hell. The inspectors were led around by the nose and mainly ignored. Once an inspector caught them with a bulldozer underground with unshielded sparks coming off it. Once the inspector left the mine, the foreman ordered Robbie to take the dozer back underground, quote, if he wanted to keep his fucking job," end quote.
These people, they should be in jail. They should absolutely.
It's horrible.
This is the industry they work in. They knew that they're putting people at risk. They knew it, right? It's not like, it's just, and the inspectors just being led around by the nose. The inspectors need some power to shut stuff down, right?
And these guys couldn't speak up because if they did, they would lose their jobs. Westray is a perfect example of industry-related injustice. Full stop.
Just absolute greed. And just having absolutely no respect for the people who are doing the work. No respect at all. This shows absolutely no respect for the workers in that mine.
Well, it's because they knew that those miners had no other options. It was either the mine or unemployment. And taking advantage of that is evil. According to autopsies and external medical examinations, all 15 miners whose bodies were recovered died within 1 minute of the explosion's ignition. Most of the miners had extremely high concentrations of carbon monoxide in their systems, a level that would cause death within 20 seconds to 1 minute. At least 3 miners sustained fatal injuries consistent with blunt force trauma. Additionally, all the recovered bodies exhibited varying degrees of burns ranging from superficial charring to 4th-degree burns. Of the 15 miners, 13 were visually identified. Shortly after the disaster, Curragh Incorporated, the parent company of Westray Coal, with 11 bodies still buried in the collapsed section of the mine, floated the idea of resuming operations, citing the substantial coal reserves in the area and the economic benefits to the region. However, the proposal was met with immediate and widespread backlash, particularly from the families of the victims and the broader public who were still reeling from the tragedy. The families of the miners expressed disgust and outrage at the suggestion, seeing it as a callous disregard for the lives lost and the ongoing pain of their loved ones. Quote, "How can they even think about reopening that mine after what happened?" said one grieving widow, echoing the sentiments of many. Another family member of a victim called the idea, quote, "an insult to the memory of those who died," adding, quote, "We still don't have the answers or accountability for what happened, and now they want to go back in like nothing ever happened?" End quote. Public opinion was similarly unforgiving. Many in the community questioned the company's motives, accusing Curragh Incorporated of prioritizing profit over safety and human lives. One local resident described the move as, quote, "greedy and shameful," while others called for a complete overhaul of safety regulations before any mining activity could resume. The RCMP began investigating the Westray Mine explosion in May, entering the mine in September to gather evidence. They accessed the southwest main shaft, believed to be the explosion's epicenter where the miners' bodies remained. Initially, Westray Coal and 4 managers faced 52 non-criminal safety violations. However, John Pearson, the province's director of public prosecutions, systematically withdrew these charges by March 1993, expressing concerns about potential criminal proceedings. 2 managers, Gerald Phillips and Roger Perry, were subsequently charged with 26 counts of manslaughter and criminal negligence causing death. Significant procedural challenges marked the subsequent legal proceedings. Justice Robert Anderson repeatedly ordered the Crown to provide full disclosure, which they had been reluctant to do. The Crown's evidence handling became so problematic that Anderson ultimately stayed the charges on June 9, 1995, citing deliberate failure to disclose key information. After appeals through the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court of Canada, prosecutors decided on June 29, 1999, not to pursue charges due to insufficient evidence. A government report in April 2000 recommended establishing specialized prosecution services for complex cases and suggested employing external experts to prevent similar judicial complications. Compensation for the victims' families and displaced miners became a contentious issue. Families received some financial assistance through insurance payouts and a $1.8 million fund raised nationwide, providing scholarships for the 43 children left fatherless. However, a proposed $13 million settlement was never finalized, leaving many feeling inadequately compensated. Survivors and 117 miners who lost their jobs received severance payments totaling $1.2 million, with individual payments ranging from $6,626 to $12,367, amounts widely seen as insufficient. A $30 million lawsuit against Nova Scotia was dismissed under the Workers' Compensation Act. The operating company, Curragh Resources, declared bankruptcy in 1993, further limiting accountability. As we do love to do in Canada after a tragedy, an inquiry was held to investigate what happened at Westray. The inquiry, led by Justice K. Peter Richard, revealed shocking levels of negligence by both the mine's management and regulatory agencies. The inquiry exposed a culture of systemic disregard for safety at the mine. Management prioritized production targets over the well-being of workers, ignoring clear hazards such as methane levels and poor ventilation. It also identified significant failures in government oversight. Provincial inspectors failed to enforce safety regulations effectively, often overlooking serious violations. Justice Richard's final report, released in 1997, described the disaster as the result of a, quote, complex mosaic of actions, omissions, mistakes, incompetence, apathy, cynicism, stupidity, and neglect, end quote. The inquiry heavily criticized Curragh Resources, the company operating Westray, and noted that corporate executives bore responsibility for the unsafe conditions. It also highlighted regulatory gaps and insufficient legal mechanisms to hold companies and individuals criminally accountable for workplace deaths caused by negligence. Despite the damning findings, no one at Westray was ever prosecuted, underscoring the limits of existing laws at the time. The tragedy and inquiry findings fueled public outrage and demands for legislative reform. After years of advocacy by workers' rights groups and families of the victims, Bill C-45, known as the Westray Bill, was introduced in 2003 to amend the Criminal Code of Canada. It was passed into law in 2004. The legislation created a legal framework to hold corporations, their executives, and other decision-makers accountable for serious workplace negligence leading to injury or death. Key provisions of Bill C-45 include 1. Corporate criminal liabilities. Organizations, including corporations, can now be held criminally responsible for the acts of their representatives, e.g., managers and executives. 2. Duty of care. Individuals with the authority to direct work are legally obligated to ensure workplace safety. 3. Accountability for negligence. The bill introduced criminal negligence offenses for workplace-related deaths or injuries due to failures in duty of care.
2004.
2004.
You really think that this stuff would have existed before then? It's incredible that it took that long and quite shameful.
Right.
Right?
I mean, had there been a union in place in that mine previously, things would have gone differently.
They would have shut it down.
And I'm not saying, I don't think all unions are great or anything, but in this particular instance, there would have been a little more oversight into what was going on there.
I've come over time to understand that in many industries, you need the push and pull of management and union. It has to be balanced, but if you let it go one way with the union calling all the shots, then you go out of business. If you let it go the other way with management calling all the shots, then people aren't treated right and it's dangerous.
Yeah.
I think you kind of need that push and pull to get to the right ground, a level playing field, right?
There are many places. This is another example where they said, okay, if you bring in a union, we close up shop. And that has kind of been the word around Bridgewater as far as union and Michelin. There's no union in Bridgewater at the Michelin plant because Michelin said, well, if you bring in a union, we'll just shut it down. But at the same time, people feel like they're being treated right.
Well, and that's the other side. If you have good employers that are treating their workers well and it's good, then it's fine. You don't need it. Right. And I think that's the point, right? If some companies have a threat of a union, then even that threat of unionization will force them to behave.
The Westray Bill was a significant step forward in workplace safety and corporate accountability. It signaled a shift in Canadian law, emphasizing that employers and organizations could face serious criminal consequences for neglecting worker safety. However, critics have argued that enforcement has been inconsistent, with relatively few prosecutions under the law since its enactment. Nevertheless, the Westray disaster and the resulting legislation continue to serve as a stark reminder of the importance of workplace safety and the severe consequences of failing to uphold it. The Westray mining disaster has been memorialized through powerful cultural expressions that capture its human tragedy and systemic failures. Books like Dean Jobs' Westray, The Price of Coal, and documentaries such as Paul Cowan's NFB film have meticulously chronicled the event, while folk musicians and playwrights have created haunting tributes that explore the personal and collective grief. A granite memorial was erected at Their Light Shall Always Shine Memorial Park in New Glasgow. It is engraved with a mining lantern with the victims' names radiating outward in a lamp's beams. So final thoughts on this one, Matthew, before we go on to voicemail? Anything?
Yeah, it's just, this should not have happened. It
No.
absolutely should not have happened. It is, I've never seen such a clear indication of just people completely ignoring safety protocols, and knowing what the consequences could be.
Right. Yep.
Right. There's one thing of just like not catching something, and there's another just blatant ignoring. Right.
Yep. And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 352, The Westray Mine Disaster.
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
All right. We have some voicemails. So here is our first one.
Boys. I know something you don't know. That is Carol Kane, not Bernadette Peters. For heaven's sake, gentlemen. I am shocked, I tell you, shocked. This is Mary in Quail Valley, California. I really love your show. But please, never sully Scrooged again. It is the best movie ever made. Have a wonderful day, and please don't shit in your hat. At least not at Christmas time. It's just unseemly. Have a good one. Bye.
Oh, boy.
She's absolutely right.
She's
Thank
correct,
you.
yeah.
I actually love both of those actresses.
Yeah, Carol Kane and Bernadette Peters. I think they get confused a lot, really. I can see that happening.
Actually always confuse them.
Yeah,
I don't
can
know
see
why,
that
but I
happening.
do, yeah.
Well, okay, so what do you think she does there in California, Matthew?
She is a, what are those people that find the actors for a movie?
A casting director?
She's a casting director.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. There you go. Well,
and
enjoy.
She's constantly casting Carol Kane.
That's why
Right.
she's so adamant.
Yeah, but people and she's always finding out that they actually meant the other one when they actually cast them.
Yeah, the director's like, bring me Carol Kane, when he actually means Bernadette Peters. Oh, boy. Let's listen to another voicemail.
使用2小时后将停止服务。英文查询，请按1；中文服务，请按2。
I get those like every week.
If you live in Vancouver, you get many of these weekly. And I don't know what that lady was talking about because I don't speak any of the Chinese languages.
Well, you should put it into like a translation service.
I could do, but I don't want to pay for it to be told that I have a package waiting for me at Canada Post, in a big lie. But anyway, so yeah, so that lady called. What do you think that person does for a living, Matthew?
She does telephone scams.
Right? Oh dear. From her home, probably in a basement apartment in Burnaby. Anyway, let's move on.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Matthew. It's Shauna calling from Marseille again. I've called in once before after I listened to the John Lennon episode. Well, I finally caught up, and now I'm waiting for actually tomorrow so I can listen to the next episode. I just want to say that every time you guys cover a case, you do it so well, and I love hearing your thoughts and opinions on every type of case you cover, whether it be a mass tragedy or even something that was just a natural disaster. It's really nice how you guys treat the victims and talk about them, and when you get the families on. I have two case suggestions for you guys. One is a murder from St. John, New Brunswick. It's the Richard Olin murder. It's a very interesting case that I think you guys would find different, and I really would love to hear your guys' opinions on that. And also, there's the Great Fire of St. John, New Brunswick. And I know you guys talked a while ago about maybe doing more New Brunswick cases, and well, being from around St. John area and it being one of the oldest cities in Canada, I feel the history here is so provident. So being able to hear you guys talk about the history and cover two major things from around here would be really cool. So yeah, thanks. Have a wonderful day, and go shit in your hat.
So, interestingly, the killing of Richard Olin, because it's a still open case, which is interesting, I have hesitated to tackle that one. So when I was a kid, we used to go out boating a lot. And one of the families that we ended up sort of tying up next to one time was the Olin family. So very interesting. I mean, they're the heirs to the Olin fortune of Olin Beer, the brewery. But yeah, so I have a feeling I played around
hopscotch,
whatever kids do, with the accused, one of the person who was suspected in Mr. Richard Olin's death, which was his son, Dennis. So it's a very weird case for me in that regard. It was a long time ago, obviously 40-something years ago that would have occurred, but that I would have been in contact with that person, that family. But yeah, it's an interesting case. We may cover it. We may. It's going to take some thought by me to get my brain around it. As far as the St. John fire, I wasn't aware of it. So I guess that's one thing that we have to look at. And our last episode was New Brunswick. So there you go. Matthew, you seem to be thinking about something.
Oh no, I'm putting a tape measure back together that I just broke.
Well, now's not the time to be doing that.
I need a new mat in my entrance hall.
You need a new mat in your entrance hall?
So I had it out and I was measuring it.
And you broke it.
Yeah, just a little plastic piece.
Oh, okay. Well, so what do you think that person does in New Brunswick there, Matthew?
Fire inspector.
Fire inspector, which is why she wants us to talk about a fire.
Absolutely.
Well, there you go. Well, that sounds fun. That sounds like a lot of fun being a fire inspector. Not really, because you would see some terrible things, I guess.
But also, fire inspectors make sure we don't have tragedies.
That's true.
It's an important job.
That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. Okay, let's move forward. We do have a patron this week.
Patreon.
And that person is Brian Royce, who I do believe we have in the Umber Yard as well. And Brian is from O'Fallon, Missouri. O'Fallon, Missouri. Yeah, what do you think that Brian does there in O'Fallon, Missouri, Matthew?
Well, he's the heir to Rolls-Royce, so he just...
Oh, wow.
He relaxes and goes fishing.
Goes fishing. He's just like, okay, I'm going fishing because, I have my Silver Ghost Rolls-Royce that I can drive around in anytime I'd like.
Absolutely.
The only reason I know Silver Ghost, remember the Mint used to make a little die-cast car? And you could buy them.
The Royal Canadian Mint?
I think it was the U.S. Mint.
Okay.
It was on U.S. channels anyway. But you could buy a little die-cast Silver Ghost. I think it was on like PBS or some silly thing. I don't know. I can barely remember it.
Did you buy one?
No, of course not. But I wanted one because when I was a kid, anything I saw on TV, I thought, I want that.
Frankenberry.
Oh my God, I loved me some Frankenberry. My favorite though, Count Chocula, of course.
See, I preferred Frankenberry.
Why did you like
Count Chocula.
Frankenberry over Count Chocula?
'Cause it
Frankenberry
tasted-
was so tart and strange, but
tasted better.
it tasted better. Okay,
Yeah.
well, fair enough.
But my favorite was Captain Crunch.
Oh, Captain Crunch, who I can't eat since somebody said the milk that Captain Crunch makes, I don't even want to say it. It just tastes like, somebody said it tastes like breast milk. And I don't know how they ever came up with that or why, but...
Remember how Captain Crunch would like shred the roof of your mouth?
Yes. But I did like the taste of it. Like I say, up until somebody said that it tastes like breast milk, and I haven't been able to eat it since.
Milk tastes like?
That's the thing. How do you know? Anyway, I don't know. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. So that's it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Are we actually ending the show on what breast milk tastes like?
Yeah.
Okay. See you later, everybody.
Boobies.